All right, so welcome. I'm Charlene Hoefbauer from Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo Wellington Dufferin. And last week I did a session on job postings. This week I'm doing something a little bit on understanding the workforce and retention. So this is kind of stats heavy. We're going to have, don't worry, we're going to kind of like take it apart. No, don't worry. It's more along the lines of surveys that have been done. And that's largely because to understand retention, we need to understand two things. Have job seekers shifted or not shifted? And how can we as employers shift to meet employees, or are those shifts not possible? So not everything I'm going to suggest is possible in your organization. That's okay. That's your organization and that's the format of your organization. I'm not asking you to change your organization. I'm asking you to think about those shifts you can make and then which ones you can't. So don't think that all of it's going to be required. Workforce change number one that we kind of seen in the past 3 years is well-being and its importance to our lives. So I've got some stuff. YMCA Workwell did a survey across Guelph, Wellington, Stratford, Perth, and Waterloo region earlier in 2021. And 51% of respondents said they didn't feel like they were a valued member of their community. Trust me, there's a reason behind this. And then when asked what people needed in the next 3 months to support their personal well-being, most popular were connections with friends and family, but 27% also wanted connections with their colleagues, and 18% just wanted someone to talk to. So in that early COVID stage, there didn't seem to be that sense of community and people belonging. And so people were looking for employers to kind of fill the gap. Despite being 2 years removed from the survey, the effects of the pandemic on well-being are still playing out. We're still seeing workforce decisions to work within the confines of the workday. It's that popular term, quiet quitting, which I think has shifted to something else now. A greater willingness to shift jobs due to bad bosses, strenuous work environments, shift work, refusal to take promotions. I have a staff person who told me she is never moving forward. She's quite happy where she is. She's done. This is as far as she wants to go. And that's becoming a more common thought process among people. So as senior roles become vacant, you will find it could be harder to find people to fill those roles, not just the entry-level ones. So with that in mind, what can we do as employers, knowing just that piece on the workforce shift? So reach your people, learn how to say their name. This is a big one as somebody with a weird last name myself, Hoefbauer. No one says my name right until I explain to them, ask them about their lives and empathize them with as situations arise. I'm not saying you need to be a doormat, but I'm saying having empathy and saying, oh, you put yourself in their shoes. That's what empathy is. It means giving people the respect and the courtesy you would want to be given and saying, we're an empathetic environment. I'm going to try and understand you. You're going to understand me. So when I make that phone call of saying, I need somebody to work, they're like, oh, if I were in those shoes, how would I feel? Offering community resources or referring people to employer resources. Some places have like counseling programs, mental health programs, assistance programs. Some don't. I don't know if the local chamber has
benefits, but we should look into
it. Some chambers have affinity programs where if you're a small business, you can join it and then you get some of those big business benefits for minimal cost. Develop the leadership and skill sets of managers, supervisors, and team leaders. So this is a big one. This one first started showing up in 2018 in the manufacturing sector, and it's now everybody. Do the people who are in your leadership roles, are they trained in how to handle difficult conversations? Do they know what discipline looks like, even if they're not implementing it, so that they can have those hard conversations? Are people in their roles letting their own feelings about a group or a generation get in the way of their ability to support all their staff? A lot of people get promoted because they're good at what they do, not because they're good with people. And that's a big challenge in retention, is some of the people who move forward because they're good at what they do. And so they don't have the skill sets to actually manage. And that's a big challenge.
With that, do you know of any training that is available around here for that skill, or is that something that someone has to have?
No, I don't think you have to have. I think you can develop this skill. There is actually something called difficult conversations or challenging conversations. Now, I'm not sure prices on it, and I think it is virtual. So it may be something the chamber does want to look into. And like, it was really great because like, how do you have a difficult conversation about you're not showing up to work every day, and that's a difficult conversation. But what I'm saying, trained in proper discipline, like, do your staff know what discipline looks like? And even if they don't have to implement it because you're going to implement it as the owner or you have an HR person, but they know what it looks like, so they know at what point they should say, hey, you need a verbal, versus we're going to let you get to here before a verbal. So like knowing those pieces as supervisors, as managers helps, and knowing how to have difficult conversations helps managers with their empathy, because then they're having those conversations if they're respectful, and people will relate because they hear that respect. Define what promotions mean for workload and responsibility, and how that will change an employee's stress levels and their workload. So many times people move into promotions and they didn't know what to anticipate, and then that creates a feedback loop of where they're getting stressed out, and that leads to things like burnout and upset. So sometimes really defining what those means. Like if you're going to move to assistant manager role, here's the added responsibilities of that. Here's the added things you're going to need to do. So if somebody says that's too much, they can say that's too much before they take on the role. Because sometimes it's not about the pay 100% on that front. Seeing how work impacts well-being from a physical lens is the second one. So a survey, I think it was across North America, said that sometimes environmental wellness perks matter to people. So things like air quality, comfortable light, water quality, comfortable temperatures, and workers are more satisfied when they have better physical environments. So 30% were more attracted to their company over competitors if it had a better physical environment. And 2/3 said that a workplace focus on their health and well-being would make them more likely to accept a job or to keep the job they have. This was confirmed yesterday when I was at a transportation conference where they were saying the same thing. If it felt like a healthy environment and a supportive environment, even Gen Z was more likely to stay, because they felt that they could succeed there because them as a person was being considered. So I know that physical environments are a hard one because I know we have some retail, things like that. And you're like, yeah, I can't keep the door open for fresh air because someone could walk in and walk out with merchandise. But let's see what we can do. So what can we do? We can determine what variables in our workplaces could be shifted. Is dimming the lights an option if nobody's in? Now, that might not be good if you're trying to look like you're open. But like, could we open a door? Could we open a door in the back as opposed to the front? If something can't be shifted, like you as an employer going through figuring out what can be shifted, write down why. And then take that, meet with staff and say, hey, I've been thinking about our work environment. What could we shift? What would you like to see? Explain what can and cannot be changed, because having that list already right off the bat will help you explain why that change cannot happen. They're like, we'd like it 2 degrees cooler. That'd be really, really great, but we have something hot going over here and it needs to stay hot, so we can't go 2 degrees cooler. What could we do to help you out? It will be a delicate balancing act because some people want fresh air, some people like air conditioning, some people like it warmer, some people like it cooler, but at least in having that group conversation within a department or within a larger context will help. Work through each variable and implement what you can implement, and then carry out those changes that can be done. Staff then say, hey, you came to us, you explained to us why this could or could not happen. We understand it now. And so if at least you understand it. So it's like, okay, I understand we cannot turn it down or turn the heat up 2 more degrees. I'm going to bring a sweater. I have a staff person who has a shawl that always sits over her legs. She is the coldest person in our office. She's never asked us to turn it up because everybody else is happy, and she recognizes that. But it's not a huge part because she sits in front of a window. So she's got the natural light she wanted. It's just not as warm as she wanted. So it's a bit of a give and take there, and she understands why we do what we do. Workforce challenge number 3, a willingness to take action to keep ourselves healthy. We're much more the one thing the pandemic has really done is made us all think about our health a lot, our mental health, our physical health, our ability to stay in a good space. So this is another survey. 50% of on-site workers, wait a second, 50% of on-site workers, 75% of remote workers, and 82% of hybrid workers took one day off for mental health reasons. So the more like, it's actually, if they're removed from the workforce, they need to take a day off a little more than if they are on the work site. But not just one generation is doing this. This is not a Gen blah thing. 76% of millennials took one mental health day. 67% of Gen X, who are sitting at about mid 40s to almost 60-ish, and 50% of baby boomers. So it's an across the board thing that everyone will take a mental health day. Managers are willing to let employees take time off without notice. 47% of managers find 2 to 3 unexpected absences a year acceptable. So that's kind of a manager thought process. So like, okay, 2 to 3 a year, that's acceptable within the realm of doable. When I say unexpected, that's more along the lines of they just call in that day. Other absences might be like I have an appointment coming up, and so I need to arrange this with you. So those are expected absences. For actually in the UK, the Retail Trust did a little further research on this one, and 54% of retail employers felt unable to deal with their team's mental health issues. So there's a training opportunity here. And 40% of managers said that if there was a head office, there's no support happening there. So that's a frustration point. If you're part of a franchise, maybe putting that information back up is not a bad idea. 75% of retailers claimed that well-being was high on their agenda of things to do, but 40% didn't know where to start. They didn't have a strategy in place. They were like, I don't know what to do. So opportunities there as well. So what can we do as employers? Know your community-based and digital mental health services. So like, what are they? Let's talk about that right off the bat. Let's figure out what they are. Let's get that information out. Ask everyone when they begin. This is something that I've started doing is, what do you need to succeed in the job? What is it that you need? Do you need somebody to handhold you? Do you need this? Do you need that? Like, what is it that you need to succeed? For those with disabilities or mental health concerns, asking that question doesn't force them to explain what disability they have or what the challenge might be. It refocuses the whole conversation on the solution. And so a person doesn't have to disclose to you. It just becomes, what do you need to succeed? And even asking that in the interview. If you get hired today, what do you think you would need to succeed? Changes the dynamic of the workplace. So for example, if it's that, you know what, I'm giving an example, I have 2 jobs. If I could get my schedule 2 weeks out, that would help immensely, because my other one does, like, if I have to give notice, I need to give it a week in advance. So if I had yours 2 weeks, it would help me accommodate this, those sorts of things. So it's not even, as weird as it sounds, it's not even a health thing. This is more of a juggling life sort thing. Set expectations, explain why attendance is important, how the team works, and their role. As amazing as it sounds, we have heard this from a number of job seekers that they show up and no one really explains what their role is. And they don't understand how they fit in their team. And so so when you don't understand that, you don't get the buy-in of, I'll do this for A because A is going to return that favor to me, because you don't understand what the give and take is of the team. That's more so with people who have sometimes international experience with some countries, but also if they're young and they're still trying to learn what the workplace even looks like at this point, and that can be a struggle. Explain the expectations around attendance and what the disciplinary process is. Too many people get silent. They're like, well, what happened? I was only late 3 times. Why is this happening now? And if you have sick days, how many days they have off a year, so that they know, and that update of, you're here, this is what you have, just so you know, so that they're making sure they're staying within the rules and they don't feel that they've been singled out, because that could be a reason why people walk from jobs as well. They feel singled out. Now, what that means, it varies from generation to generation. but a point. And develop an absence policy and even a wellness policy, share it with all the staff so that everyone's on board, everyone's invested, everyone knows what it is. Another thing we've discovered is a lot of organizations don't do this well. They don't explain their policies or they don't have them. And it seems sometimes to workers, from what we've heard, is things are done here and there and everywhere, as opposed to some sort of format that what happens to that person also happens to me. So that is can be a struggle in some workplaces, and it can be why people leave, because they're like, well, they like them more, and it's just a inconsistent policy adoption and policy happening. I am going to send this to you. Yes, so you have all those pieces. Higher levels of dissatisfaction with work is actually something we've seen since more people are reporting it. Canadian worker satisfaction and commitment to work has dropped 6% since 2021. This survey was done in 2022. So in a year, we saw a 6% drop. Satisfactions with working conditions decreased to 74%. That's down 6% from 2021. And satisfaction with salary dropped 10% year over year. Now, that was the year, I believe, that inflation went up like 7%. It was a really big jump that year. So that's probably why the dissatisfaction with salary went up. If you have an opportunity to let people work remotely, most people want about 3.8 days from home. Another study put this at 3. I'll be honest, my staff work at 2 days from home and they're pretty darn happy. So, because they tend to put all their stuff they have to do on that day to minimize the impact of their workday. So, I know not everyone can do remote, you can do hybrid, but if you can, that's an opportunity. And when we did this survey, and when this survey came out in 2022, 1 in 5 Canadians were thinking about taking on a new position in the future. The last I heard, that number is now 1 in 4. So 25% of working Canadians are thinking about a new position constantly. Why? They're disconnected from their work. They don't feel engaged. They don't feel part of the team. They don't feel like they're doing work that makes sense. 72%, it's a work to live perspective instead of living to work. Former generations have had kind of I live to work. My work is who I am. That's not the case with some newer generations. Theirs is, I make money so that I can live. I think that's very, very true at this point with the cost of housing, with the cost of other things, and with the thought process that most newer workers are never going to afford homes. So that whole, I need to pay a mortgage could potentially disappear. And if that disappears, they're working to actually go out and live. And that's why I know that Gen Z is the biggest purchaser of luxury items, because they're never going to afford rent. They're never going to afford a home. So it totally flips the whole work relationship on its head. And 36% viewed work as a fulfilling activity. So they're not getting fulfillment out of what they do. So how do we change that? Because that's pretty big. Explain the role of how the worker helps the business and what's in it for them with growth and more or happier customers. There should be some reward that is not more work. Tends to be when we succeed, we get more work. And that's not what this group is looking for. It's not what most people right now are looking for, regardless of that. But even explaining how someone grows a business. So, for example, if I'm a manufacturer and I make widgets and we sell more widgets, I have more money to put back into the business, which can include salaries. Like that's a feedback loop of why I do what I do. Or if we're struggling right now and you put in the effort, you will continue to have a job. As crazy as that sounds, like that's people don't understand how their economic impact the company is, what that means for them. So sometimes explaining that helps a lot. Check in with staff on progress, things they want to learn. I understand there's unionized advisors who can't cross-train, but if you can cross-train to keep people's minds going and what they could do, that's an opportunity. Know where you are in the pay spectrum for the roles in your company. So where are you actually? You can actually go to the job bank. It's called labor market information. Then you go to wage reports. You put in your knock. So if it's a retail salesperson's, you click Kitchener, Waterloo, Barrie. It will give you the low end, the exact middle. So half make less, half make more, and the high end. So you can say, okay, this is where I am on the spectrum of actual pay. So if you're low end, then you're like, okay, I'm going to have more of a challenge to keep my people. So what, and I can't, for some reason, you can't raise that pay. What else can I do? And some of these other ideas might be the missing piece that, yes, someone may be getting less pay, but there's other opportunities. Is that flexibility? Is that gift cards every month for meeting quotas? Like what is it? The other thing I'm going to suggest is you go to findyourjob.ca, you look up the knock code, so retail salespersons in the career library, and it will give you what the advertised rates are. So the reason I'm pointing this one out is if you're like, okay, say it's, I pay $20 an hour, but everybody's advertising 18. I should probably put that in my posting because that's going to make people want to come in and then maybe make them want to stay because everybody else is posting 18 and the market is telling them they're only worth 18. But I know me paying them 20 is actually above the median. So those sorts of things, getting strategic on how you're talking about them, but always checking in to see where you are in comparison to other people who are hiring that position, would help you with that pay side of it.
So say the job bank is where you go to see the actual, and then find your job is where to see the advertised.
Where the advertised is. So you can kind of figure out like where I am in the actual, okay, I pay more, or I pay about the median, but maybe it's advertised, I'm paying less. So to give you an example, I had an inquiry from a manufacturer and they were looking at a certain occupation. And I said, hey, you pay according to the job bank, that job is comes out with like 40 hours a week, 52 hours or 52 weeks a year, comes up to $44,000. But when I go to the advertised, you guys are telling people you only pay them 37. You have a $7,000 discrepancy between what you are in industry advertising for that role and what you're actually paying. So if you can actually demonstrate that you're paying the 44 and you put it in, it's going to look really, really good compared to the fact that if I'm looking for that role in other companies, they're telling me they're paying a lot less. So it's that sort of piece, that sort of exploration piece of, is there a chance for me to get myself ahead of what's being advertised and what the actual is? So a couple of comparison points, depending on where your struggle is in this, the actual might be more important, or it might just be your advertised is more important. Because if your advertised community is more than what you're paying people, but you might be a little bit behind, and then you're going to get people out the door. So doing that constant check-in of where the advertised is just letting you know if your people are looking, like, okay, they're looking and I'm still ahead of the curve. They're not going to probably leave because to move into that same role elsewhere is not going to look good. But if it suddenly becomes close to what you're paying, you might need to have that conversation with payroll or the owner or whoever it is to say, hey, we're getting pretty close to, everyone's catching up. What do we do about this? Just kind of staying ahead of what's happening. The next change is employees want respectful, well-paid work. So this research kind of looked at people who left their work. So this is like people who are out the door already. What did they say? So it's just 61% said it was somewhat easier to find a new and better job. Why they left: low pay, no opportunities for advancement, which we actually saw in the employer one in 2022. It's the first time it's ever been mentioned by employers. Feeling disrespected at work. Half of the people who responded said childcare issues were a reason for quitting. And 48% of that group had children younger than 18. So childcare right now is a huge issue. If you are an employer and anyone wants to talk to you about childcare, like tell them what it means to you. Tell them the economic impact of what that means, because I'm actually working with a couple groups to talk about what caring at work allows people to do. If we don't resolve childcare, we're going to see many women drop out of the workforce. Just like if suddenly all the retirement homes closed and all the long-term care homes closed, we see massive amounts of women leave the workforce. So there's some groups right now that are female-dominated occupations, and if they were to suddenly leave, you would see mass exodus of women from the workforce. Childcare is one of those right now. I have somebody in a local area who, despite the fact that the locally there's a supply supposedly, she hasn't had anyone in one of her classrooms since October. So there's 8 families that cannot have access to childcare because they cannot find a staff person. So that's the kind of situation we're looking at here. Flexibility of hours and lack of benefits. This one goes on a little further with some more stuff. Most of those people who left were making more money. They had an easier time balancing work and family, and they had flexibility to choose their work hours. Adults younger than 30 were more likely than older adults to have voluntarily left their job last year. 37% of those young adults under 30 versus like 17% of 30 to 49, 9% of 50 to 64, and 5% of those 65 and older. We have seen in the past couple of years that older workers were more likely to stay versus younger workers. A little bit of research around how employees see management, because we talked a little bit about management, right? And making sure they had the skill sets and everything. 33% of workers did not believe their views were considered part of management making decisions. So they believed that decisions were made that had no support from staff. It just seemed to come out of nowhere. And that's why I was kind of saying, like, having those conversations with staff might help them realize why changes are being made. 53% of workers thought their employers were poor communicators. And 66% of workers struggled to know how, when, and where they were supposed to work. So this, I think the 66 falls into the 53 is some communication there that's not being fully done. This will cross every industry. So there may be some industries where this is happening more or less. So speaking of those things, what do we do as employers? I don't know if you ever heard of a stay interview. It's where you actually, instead of an exit interview, when someone's leaving you and finding out what's wrong, you just randomly go around and ask people like, hey, you're still here, you're 6 months in, we just want to sit down with you and have a chat and see how it's going. And you really just literally have the chat of what's working well for you, where are the challenges, what sort of things do you want to see, are there things you want to learn? It's called a stay interview. And it's just kind of gauging for you how to keep everyone engaged. You don't have to do it with everyone. It can be kind of a selection of people, but that's an opportunity for employers to kind of see what's keeping people. So you want to do it with the ones you've kept for a little while. Consider communications training for all staff and leaders. I'm pretty sure if you checked with the Wellington County Learning Center, I bet you they have something on active listening or they could develop something for sure. For some of the local employers, like how to deliver feedback. I will be honest, having 2 children myself, younger children don't get a lot of feedback. They get 2 report cards a year, and it's a 10-month school year, and that's what they get. And they get marks, and it doesn't seem like they get feedback on what they're doing right and where it's going sideways. So there is some of that happening where as they're entering the workforce, they're not sure what to do with that feedback. They're not sure how to move forward with it. No one's ever explained to them what to do with it. They just know they just failed at it. And so they kind of give it up instead of like, this is an opportunity for you to grow. Here's what I'm going to explain to you. And here's what we could work on. Here's our plan to make it better. And that helps to build respectful relationships. So I think there's an opportunity there, maybe with that literacy group, to develop some things for staff or for leaders. And I do say staff because I think staff also need to be taught how to deal with feedback. I don't think it's just a management delivery. I think it's the staff have to learn a little bit how to take feedback and know, yes, I'm not walking out of my job tomorrow. It's fine. It's just my boss sees some improvement and it's for my own good. Define your jobs. Have a first day orientation process that outlines the company, what it does, the role of the employee, and how they fit with others. We just worked with a startup manufacturing company who had no first day orientation process and had no payroll on the first day. So they had nothing the first day. They inadvertently hired somebody on a visitor's visa. Now they're in trouble with the government. So like having those 1, 2, 3 pieces is so important. Like, here's everything we need to collect from you. We also worked with an organization that had hired some students for facilitation. And students don't know how to fill out payroll paperwork. Students don't know what insurance looks like. I had to explain to my 25-year-old worker because he had never had his own insurance. He'd always been on his mother and father's. And here he was, he's like, is this included? Is that included? What does this mean? What does that mean? So it was like kind of an orientation session to here's what benefits look like, right? Because they're not, because some of our younger workers have never been in those roles. Sometimes I think as employers, we think, oh, it's common sense. We've been doing this for 30 years. Whereas to some groups, even like newcomers, they're not aware of all the opportunities that exist in our environments. Connect the employee to someone who is trained on how to coach, mentor, and support new employees. I have seen people be mentors who've never had any sort of training on how to coach someone. And so what they're doing is they're just following the person around and pointing out everything they've done wrong. Not supportive, not of here, let me show you how to do it. Now you replicate it, right? That's the difference between coaching and whatever the other thing was. So sometimes having that coaching mentoring opportunity is really great. Check in regularly with the employee on their key tasks and responsibilities. So if you hopefully in the process, you've explained to them what they are, check in a week later. Hey, how's this going? Like, did you do this? Do you have any problems with this or any questions with this? Can I watch you do that? Is that part of that, especially if they're new to your environment, is part of that supportive process. Oh, sorry, that's a typo. Go over work components to ensure employee understands each aspect of the role. Like I said, we're sometimes so used to our environments that what we think is common knowledge in our work environments is not common knowledge to people who are new to our work environments. And I say that as a company and as from industry perspective. I've had people come in and they say, they're like, oh, well, what about this and this? And I'm like, we're not profit. We don't have that. That's not something we do. So everyone is kind of, I think really as a leader myself and as a manager, sometimes I forget that sometimes it's not common. It's just common because I've been doing it for so long. So that sometimes is good, is to take yourself back to when I started, what were all the things I needed to know? And kind of the last one is our values and what work means is changing. It hasn't stopped. I'm listening to different conversations, but what we value now is a lot different than what we did before the pandemic for a lot of different people. So organizations that were anticipating high growth, a really thriving workforce, and had innovative cultures all shared one thing in common. And that was that they focused on becoming more human and in turn becoming more relatable. So they brought it back into that human element where people weren't cogs, people were humans. 63% of employees say they are thriving in their current role. More men than women. I'm going to guess this is partially the daycare issue and the needs of families. We're going into respiratory disease season. There's going to be a lot of stress on women this season, especially because we're already seeing COVID numbers go up. Here we are so many years removed from, like not removed from TAG, but when it started. So I think this is going to continue to be a struggle for women. And then juggling childcare. And I just read something that said the number of people between 40 and 55 who are dealing with aging parents has like doubled. They are sitting in hotel rooms and they're on meetings while a nurse is going over and checking over their father because he's just had major surgery. That sort of response is happening so much more. So it's not just one group over another group struggling. They're just struggling for different reasons. Gen X and baby boomers say that a sense of belonging is more important, and millennials place a lot of value on learning new skills. Gen Z was not in this one, and I'm guessing because when they did this one, Gen Z would, like, some of them would have been in the workplace for 7, 8 years, and the others would be in for 3, because the beginning of Gen Z is just now turning 27, and they go all the way back to like 13. So they're not quite fully engaged yet. 88% of employees feel satisfied in their current role, but 2 in 5 still planned on leaving. So Gen Z was actually the most satisfied. They are the happiest in their jobs, but they are the most likely to leave at 55%. So satisfaction, if you're still measuring retention by satisfaction, it's an outdated measurement. The two are not connected in any way, shape, or form. We still don't know what that indicator is yet. So I think with research still coming down, because this research was just done in 2022, we'll start to see what helps with that retention piece. Right now, we know it's not satisfaction. 63% feel energized by their work, down a little bit, but men and millennials are more likely to feel energized when they come to work and when they leave work. And 81% report fear of burnout. That is highest in Gen Z and millennials. They did have some research in that piece. 78%, so almost 80% of your Gen X, who are, like I said, were about mid 40s to almost 60-ish, and 58% of that boomer who are, they're just 60-ish, if I remember. So there's a lot of fear of burnout, even still last year, with everything that's going on. So it's a real mixed bag. And to kind of show you how much it's changed, these are the most important indicators for jobs according to people. So you'll see that number 1 is still job security. I want a secure job. That's still a really important factor. Number 2 is flexibility. That used to rank at 17 before COVID. So that really jumped. Competitive pay moved to 3. It used to be number 2. So there's some real shifts in how we're looking at work happening. The other one is 5, vacation and time off policies. Like, what's your policy? What's it look like? What can I expect? That jumped from 20 to 5. So there have been some real shifts in what's important. Like, even though I said career progression was important, it's moved from like 4 to 7. So other things are taking over from their research. They had a pretty big group, and so I'm just looking here. And so there's been some real mix in our workers as to what's important. So things that may have been important in the past aren't quite the same type of important. And things like time, that's the kind of, if you look at it, the thing that's really important is secure job, decent pay, and time. I think one thing COVID taught us is our time is worth money. And there are things to do that need to be done. So when a lot of workers are looking at work, regardless of generation, they're really thinking differently about work and what it means to them. As well, there are certain groups that are more likely to burn out. Millennials are more likely to burn out, especially if they're professionals. Women are more likely to burn out. Employees who have been with the company for 2 to 4 years are more likely to suffer burnout. Not your early ones, not your super late ones, kind of that 2 to 4, they've been there for a while, they kind of get processes, and they could be struggling a little bit. And for some reason, people in Calgary and Vancouver. So Toronto did not make the top 10, did not make the top 2. But at the same time, 45% of workers are not comfortable expressing that they're burned out to their managers. So there is still a stigma about actually talking about burnout. So those other pieces where I was saying, checking with your employees and seeing how they're doing, they won't tell you, but you can start to guess that they might be headed that way. Oh, my mom's in hospital and my daughter's started preschool, and things going really great here. But I had a problem last week with the customer, and you're like, okay, we've got a little bit going on here. Let's check that off, and I'm going to check in with you a little more often, right? And the last two are more around your hiring processes. So I left them there because I did plan to share this. But we're focused more on retention. So I think from this perspective, I left those in because I think a lot of people are looking right from the beginning. And I just wanted to reinforce this from last time, right from the beginning as to whether you're going to be a good employer. And like I said last time, your job postings and your interview process are going to become so much more important to give that really good first impression because of these numbers. 72% losing interest in a job they don't hear back from an employer within 10 days after the initial interview. So you got 10 days to decide if you're going to hire them or not. And more people cited if it was a poor interview process. 7 to 14 days is too long of a hiring process, according to most candidates. You'll lose 57% of them. So come back to it. What can we do as employers? Because all this looks daunting. I think it would be fair to say, recognize staff when they have achievements, they need a goal. If there's a budget, offer a reward. Offering alternatives is good too, because you probably have a diverse workforce. So $100 Amazon, like a $50 Amazon card, or a gift card to a grocery store, or a Starbucks card. Like there's lots of opportunities, or Cineplex, or $50 at EB Games because you have a bunch of gamers. Like look at, if you know your staff, those kind of incentives will help a little bit. And meet the needs of the group. Create belonging, offer the ability to learn more skills as you get to know the team, respond with things that bring value. So this is about getting to know that team to create those rewards. But also, like I said, if you're not unionized, you can develop some cross-training potentially and take that the next step. This is one that someone brought up to me that they do every time they have a staff meeting or a department meeting. They have everyone gauge their energy level. So where's your energy level sitting at today? And I said, so how do you do that as a boss and not bring everybody down, or they all decide that their energy level is now at 5 too? And they said, you know what? I just tell them. They said one day I came into work and it was a rainy day and we've been going for about an hour and a half. And I finally turned to everyone and I said, it's such a horrible day and I just do not feel motivated. And they all laughed and said, oh, thank God somebody said it. Right. But it was the acknowledgement that, okay, we're going to still work, but we may not be on top of our game today. And that's one day out of all the days we work. And I think they said, one of them came up to him and said, thank you for just proving that you're human and you're not some super being that we're all trying to live up to. So pieces like that, that remind you that you're human too, engaging those energy levels to kind of, well, you're a little low today and you seem a little bit high. So maybe we want to keep you two away from each other a little bit because you're going to make her crazy and she's going to make you crazy. So we're going to pair you with you because you're only 1 or 2 off of her and we're going to pair her, and we're going to understand that they might not perform the same way today, but they'll make up for it. Right? Offer incentive to get the team through rough patches. These should be inclusive, not necessarily food, but could even be opportunities to win items. So buy something a little bit bigger ticket that your team will love, and if they do it, then they get entry points. My team today, I'll be honest, went through a really rough patch this past week. We've been planning an initiative. We've been really, really hard, and I actually had a student who actually organized the whole thing. You bet she got an Amazon card because the effort that she put in and how many extra hours she put in. I was like, yes, you're getting paid for it, but can I recognize that was just amazing, right? So those rough patches, I know we're going to go into another one in November. I'm going to treat the team to a lunch, right? Like we're all going to go out to lunch somewhere. We're not going to order pizza, but we're going to go out somewhere and I'm going to show you my appreciation. So create a day without meetings. So it's a company, something came out of IT where like some companies like no meetings on Fridays. Like you're just working on what you need to work on so you can focus. Sometimes that's not for every environment, but I wanted to be inclusive as I could. And have someone go through as a blind person through your interview process. Like send someone that through your interview process that the interviewer doesn't know and have them give you feedback. So what did you think? Did you understand the job? Did you understand where you were going to be? Did you understand what the our initiatives were, our incentives, whatever it was that you were trying to measure that people understood? Send someone through. So if it's you, it's not going to be helpful. But you could have somebody else pick a blind candidate, hand off a resume, say, you want to interview this person, and have that person provide that feedback to you. It might not be easy to do in some organizations, easier in others, but it's an idea. And maybe you can adapt that idea for yourself. So that's kind of a lot of content for in a very short time. I think I've 20 minutes. But do you have questions out of that? And I'm happy to go back to slides and work through them.
People with the generations again, like I was getting some who and like
who's yeah,
each generation
so
like 5.
I'll start with the baby boomers. Baby boomers are about 60 and older. They would be that generation. They're one of the big generations. They've got like 20 some odd years of thought process. And they are the ones who, well, if they were older, like my parents, they're hippies, but the younger ones are, they would have been born 60s-ish, early 60s. Gen X was born about later side of the 60s. This one's debatable, kind of like 80 is usually the cutoff. So it's a small generation. It's 15. It's very small generation, might I add, because the boomers were so big. And then there was like X. And if you think back to the 90s, they were like the slackers. We all heard about the slackers, and they didn't respect the man. And actually starting to sound a lot like Gen Z. And then there were the millennials, who are kind of the 80. I'm going to take them to about the mid 90s. They definitely remember things like the World Trade bombing. So that's a part of them. They are considered entitled. Everyone gets a trophy. Their parents are boomers. So if they got trophies, it's because their parents gave them trophies. So you can't blame that thought process on millennials. It's because the parents create that generation, right? We create our own issue. And then that Z group, I've heard it as early as 97 or 2000, and it goes to about 2011, 2012. So they're a little, I think it's 1997 is what I saw yesterday to 2012. So they are post-secondary grads. They're in their early work careers if they're professionals, but they've also probably worked part-time. And some of them can't even start working yet. So because my kids are Gen Zers. And one's 14 and one's 12. So they're kind of in that process. And they are digital natives. They are more likely to communicate that they have mental health issues because they do not see it as a stigma, which can be a struggle. And I just found out yesterday that 48% of themselves consider them 48% of them consider themselves sexually fluid. So that means they don't have a preference and they have a fluidity to them. So I'm not going to say they're bisexual per se, but they kind of see themselves within that 2S LGBTQ plus community.
You to learn that.
It's been a while and it's a lot of practice, but they kind of see themselves as part of that community. And so and they haven't quite fully come into their own, right? So because they're still kind of in high school, and they have been through they the earlier ones watched their parents go through the recession in 2008 and everything that destroyed in their parents. And then the younger ones have watched the pandemic, which has affected, it's kind of weird because they didn't learn some things, but they learned other things. So sometimes they're socially awkward. They are as a group, but it's because they lost a year and a half of socialization, some of them at very key times. They lost out, some of them lost out on graduations. And so I can't fault them that. But at the same time, they had to teach themselves. For a year and a half, they had to teach themselves because their professors and their teachers were still learning how to do it. Someone I spoke to yesterday said, we are the YouTube DIY generation. Like we will do YouTube and we will go on and we will watch everybody who is an expert and then we will do it. So there may be from that group a questioning of what's the point of post-secondary education, because I can just teach myself, and there are tons of
independence.
There is, which is kind of funny because looking back at who their parents are, they're Gen Xers and early millennials, and they were considered independent because they were latchkey kids, right? They did their parents gave them the key and said, "Yeah, let yourself in and cook yourself dinner." So it's not super surprising their kids would be highly independent either. Just like baby boomers who had lots of opportunity taught their children that they would have lots of opportunity, and it didn't work out for them because economics changed. So we can't sometimes fault the generation because their parents taught them what they knew. Gen Alpha, who is 11, they're Gen A, a little bit different. They're still being born. So yeah, so they're 11 and younger. And their parents are going to be millennials. So that will be interesting to see how that comes out. Although a few will have late Gen X parents, but like they're still working it out. I remember there's a few things like Gen Z is like a digital native. A lot of them spend time on their phones because that's just what they do. Like they don't do other things. So that's what they do is they spend time on their phone, and they can spend that time and multitask. So it'll be interesting to see how Gen A comes up and how they're different, because they won't just be digital natives. There's some cases of late Gen Z alphas actually taking detox days from technology.
And they shift the way
but my generation, I'm an Xer. We used to take days off from TV. So it just becomes a new medium. And so we'll see how that goes moving forward.
I've never realized it's like X, millennials, Y, and then Z, and now we're starting over.
Yeah.
There's a reason to it.
There's very much a reason to it. So that's kind of a nutshell on the generation.
It's to understand who you're dealing with.
Yeah. And kind of where they're coming from. So, and like I said, there's some groups you're like, oh, it's such a horrible trait. And then you're like, yeah, but your parents and, the people who were the decision makers made that decision. And so you can't be surprised that that's the result of it. And then it becomes, okay, so how do I, as a decision maker, help shift that and then re-explain it? And as employers, sometimes that's the opportunity. I heard you two talking, and you were saying, that it happens. And but if a young person says, well, I don't want to work that long, it's because they were taught something there. And so it's come down that way. And it could be that extra distrust of institutions, because institutions have failed them repeatedly, so they don't have their children trust them, right? So those sorts of things can come into play.
That's really interesting, because you were kind of talking about how someone no-shows and you're like, well, I'm not going to help you if you don't help me, kind of thing. But if it's a Gen Zer, they're just going to walk away because they don't like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, how would you expect a reasonable person to be treated versus in their era, how would they expect to be treated?
Yeah.
And it's like, you obviously want to treat them how you think is the reasonable way, but you're just going to lose people. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, so there's lots of different components, because I think from a historical perspective, just not labor market information, but after every pandemic, society shifts society has a major shift.
Mhm.
So I think that's what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a
Our
major.
accountant talked about this 2 years ago. He told us it would be a max exodus of everything across everybody across the board, which is exactly what your
Yeah.
data is
Yeah.
displaying. And he said it will be, how do you call it? The great,
They did call it the Great Resignation for a while
that's
there.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that
And,
was,
and he said it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
he said people will just walk away because they're not going to get to be able to work from home and everything else like they have been. He said, especially professionals. And he said, in our office, people are going to be required to have to come.
Yeah.
And he said, within the community that he works, they have a professional meeting, like once a month, different professions, and there's lawyers and accountants and such across the board. And he was talking about how the lawyers had been deals lost because people working from home did not do their work, and they thought, oh well, if I hand it in at 7 o'clock at night, it's fine, it's still within that business day.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's not even having any consideration for what you're doing that you've been trained to do previously. And you don't even, to me, the care and the consideration is not there, because that's not a business day.
And that's one of those pieces where it's like, for a lot of those professionals, and speaking as one of those, the business day has blurred tremendously. Like, there are some companies, and I think that's the challenge, is because the 9 to 5 isn't the 9 to 5 anymore. It's the 9 to 3. I think there was research on this that said that most people take time off between 4 and 6. So if you're expecting something for a 5 o'clock deadline, you should move it up to like a 2 o'clock. So, because most people will take time to cook dinner, pick up their kids, so that 5 o'clock deadline is maybe a thing of the past. I played around with the concept of core hours for a while, where core hours meant that everybody was on at the same time. I played with that concept and then kind of ditched it when we moved to the pandemic. But I was playing around with that as a professional environment. Like, everybody's here at this time, and any sort of deadline like that would be within those core hours, right? And I think that's the struggle now, is seeing people who are like, yeah, but the day shifted. And so
when you're dealing with courthouses or such, their day did not shift.
Yeah, and that's that realization of what's happening in your industry, and having that conversation. To say, this still needs to happen at this time. Is there going to be a challenge? And then if that's the challenge, say, okay, now the new timeline is 3 o'clock. Like, you don't go anywhere till 3 o'clock, and that's some of those things that I know employers are having to deal with. Yeah. And I don't, at this point, it's looking like, to do that retention piece, the workers aren't going to change. Unless the economy softens, and then there might be some conversation. And we're looking towards a softening.
And
we're looking towards a softening right now. So there will be some challenges moving forward, and what's going to happen. And then there might be that opportunity. And in some industries, employers can be a little more, there's just more people wanting in. So they can play some of those pieces that have traditionally been there, like, this is the work day and you don't have a choice, and they don't need to do as much consultation. And then others are in that boat where I can't find anyone, so I'm losing people, so I'm going to have to rethink how I do it. So we're kind of in this weird, some are going to have to, some aren't. And there's that dance right now.
What do you think with the coming, like they say, there's going to be a bit of a recession coming up? You think that there's going to be a major shift back to because you had talked last week about like the worker market versus the employer market.
Yeah.
You shift back to the employer market?
Depends on your industry. Because I'm not sure, even with the softening, that manufacturing will stop. So manufacturing will continue to have to adapt. Transportation sometimes is an indicator of how we're going to go. And despite the fact there was a little bit of a softening and some reduction in staff, they haven't slowed either. And I'm wondering if it's because manufacturing hasn't yet slowed. And I'm not sure, like we were kind of like a year ago, right? Tech was having a problem, but nobody else was having a problem. So it's like, did tech lead the recession? I don't know. We're going to kind of see. But tech let go of so many software developers who had 4 years experience and should get you a tech job anywhere in the world, and they're still unemployed, right? So some industries, some occupations, we will still see that, and others we won't. I think it's going to be a very depends who you are sort of scenario. I do know, like right now, it also depends where you are. So down in Kitchener, if you have part-time entry-level roles, you are swimming right now in resumes because the international student population. There are too many students for the number of vacancies. So they're in a situation where the employers can dictate a little more what that relationship looks like versus like in some other areas where that's not the case. Like my colleague up in the 4 counties, her employers have to refigure everything else because unemployment's so low, and what do we do? And the woman who was here last time was saying, in one location she gets 98 resumes, and the other one she gets 10. I was like, well, that's the difference in your communities, straight up. So that's a challenge going forward. So. No questions?
No,
I will.
Yes,
we'll
I
send
would
the
really
PowerPoint.
like to have this kind of just cruise over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
what
it
fits with the,
yeah.
like you said,
I think as well, I really think you should reach out and see what sort of training could be developed for employers, like for.
We're always looking for new things to be.
Yeah, and I think there might be an opportunity there, especially around feedback and things like that. So
giving feedback, taking feedback.
Yeah. I can't find the record button now. Oh, stop recording. Thank you.